morning of May 3rd, 1845, a schooner traveling down the Milwaukee River crashed into the Spring Street Bridge, rendering it inoperable. Whether a freak accident or a deliberate act of retribution, the crash was the catalyst for a conflict that would transform the budding settlement of Milwaukee into a battlefield of attrition between the east and west sides of the river, changing the history of the city forever. Milwaukee, as we know it, was established on January 31st, 1846, the incorporation of three separate wards: Walker's Point to the south, Kilbourne Town on the west side of the river, and Juneau Town on the east side. Solomon Juneau, an accomplished fur trading accountant and son-in-law of Jack View, the first white settler in the region, founded his city in 1818. The town would prosper due to trade with Chicago across Lake Michigan, and Juneau would establish many ventures, including the Milwaukee Sentinel, the oldest continually operating business in Wisconsin. But in the 1830s, a new man, seeing the great economic potential of the region, set himself up on the west side of the river and wasted no time causing trouble for Juneau Town. Byron Kilbourne's father, James, was a successful land surveyor who negotiated the borders of Ohio and would go on to serve 2 terms in Congress for the state he had helped form. When Byron joined the family business, he specialized in the construction of canals, a means of transportation much quicker and cheaper than overland. After successfully connecting Ohio's Miami Canal to Lake Erie, Kilbourne decided to cut out, and following the same dream as his father, established new land further west. Keen on the success of Chicago, Kilbourne sought to establish a trading hub of its kind in Wisconsin, and found no better spot than on the banks of the Milwaukee River. He established Kilbourne Town in 1834, distributing maps that left out Juneau Town. Passengers arriving to Kilbourne Town would be told the east side of the river was nothing more than an Indian trading post. Kilbourne intentionally adjusted the street grid of his town to misalign with that of Juneau Town, a decision still visible in the diagonal bridges that span the river today. While Kilbourne did agree to the construction of bridges spanning the Milwaukee, he saw little advantage, even some risk, due to his reliance on ferrying as a means of trade and transportation. On that fateful day in early May, his concern was justified when a schooner crashed into one of the few bridges Kilbourne favored. Immediately, rumor spread that the captain had been paid by Solomon Juneau to get back at the West Siders for their refusal to pay bridge maintenance. Whether true or not, the West Siders gathered tools and began deconstructing the west side of the Chestnut Street Bridge, favored by the east side, in order to repair the Spring Street Bridge. A.C. Wheeler, in his 1861 Chronicle of Milwaukee, writes, "A score of men with teams were digging manfully at the street on the west side, and fast rendering all connection between the bridges and the bank a matter of history and memory only." The East Siders, taken by a similar rage, gathered weapons including a cannon loaded with clock weights due to the unavailability of shot, and aimed it across the river at Byron Kilbourne's house. Mere moments before destruction, a prominent East Side lawyer declared that Kilbourne's daughter had died that morning, and the house was filled with mourners by her coffin side. Thankfully, his appeal fell on sympathetic ears, and no cannon was fired that day. On the 28th of May, East Siders gathered again to discuss the issue of the bridges, and before long, the crowd commenced upon the Spring Street Bridge and Menominee Bridges, and according to A.C. Wheeler, having vented their spite on the inoffensive timbers, this crowd of citizens immediately felt better. As months passed, passions cooled, and the senselessness of the destruction became apparent, as did the necessity for cooperation between Juneau Town and Kilbourne Town, if either was to survive. On January 31st, 1845, a joint council between the wards met and agreed to cease animosity officially and forever between the east and west sides, and so ended the Milwaukee Bridge War. On the 31st of January, the city of Milwaukee was officially incorporated, with Juneau sworn in as its first mayor, a position Kilbourne would later fill. Byron Kilbourne would go on to become the president of the Milwaukee and Mississippi Railroad for 3 years until he was fired for misappropriating rail bonds and bribing state officials. Disgraced, he moved to faraway Florida to relieve his arthritis symptoms, and died there 2 years later at the age of 69. Solomon Juneau died a year after his wife while on a visit to the Menominee tribe, at the age of 65. Today, both men are buried in Milwaukee.